to begin our Connectional Reopening webinar, the Senior Bishop of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, Bishop Lawrence L. Riddick III.
Hello, I greet you today on behalf of the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church and in the name of our Lord Jesus. Today, with more than 112,000 persons in the United States now dead of a coronavirus pandemic identified as COVID-19, the CME Church, which strongly encouraged the sheltering in that most of us experienced in March and April and May, is watching the reopening going on in almost every state. In some places, churches are anxious to return to worship in church buildings. Yet also in some places, individual members are reluctant to trust what it may mean to return to church buildings. All around us, many communities are reopening and ramping up business as usual. But the contagious nature of this virus, the fact that African Americans with health complications are among those who are most vulnerable to it, and the companion fact that these very older African Americans with health complications are a vast percentage of the people who populate our active congregants, makes the official CME Church leadership want to consider carefully the pros and cons of opening up, the questions of when and how, and the issues of what to do before opening. These are important issues, both for the present and the future. This discussion today is a brief beginning toward these discussions to follow. I live in Texas. This week in Texas, which our governor opened up against really the wishes and expressions of health officials and the local legal executive authority in our county. We have seen this last week the hospitalizations for COVID-19 spiraling upward. In addition, a divisive atmosphere in which even the wearing of masks is now being politicized. The way the Centers for Disease Control's initial report was essentially censored by this national administration. And the fact that some places appear to be more affected than others all make it hard to make one official statement. As of today, the CME Church does not have an official statement on our reopening, nor do we have official policies adopted for all congregations. Perhaps this discussion today and responses from CMEs to this discussion and these issues will help us move in that direction. That being said, I must hasten to say to the CMEs of Texas, please keep worshiping outside of the church building. I keep hearing God's word to David, who desired to build God a house. Do you think I need a house to dwell in? After the temple was built, Solomon said, behold, the heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have built. The church itself is not just a building. We are the church, whether meeting on Zoom or conference call or Facebook or by internet TV or some other medium. So I urge those members in Texas, as well as those in Jamaica where the virus is also growing, please use alternative means and methods of worshiping other than congregating in the church buildings. Yesterday in Dallas, we had the funeral service for Bishop Ronald Cunningham inside one of our church buildings. Yet, as careful as we were about our seating arrangements yesterday for that funeral, I saw the stubbornness of some people who decided, against the usher's directions, to just sit where they chose to sit, without regard to social distancing requests. And I saw the close congregating after the service was over, that made me wonder if we are ready yet to follow guidelines for reentry. So today begins a discussion, and perhaps from this, an official statement may come. Perhaps we will hear today more facts about the virus, why this one is so contagious and dangerous, and how we can protect ourselves and others when we come together. I want to thank Dr. Pernessa Steele of the Balm in Gilead and the panelists who have been gathered for this discussion. And I also want to thank the College of Bishops, in particular our chair, Bishop Brown, our secretary, Bishop Jefferson Snorton, and our assistant secretary, Bishop Walker, for facilitating this discussion today. Now I am pleased to present to you my colleague in this ministry, Bishop Teresa Jefferson Snorton of the 5th Episcopal District.
Thank you for joining in this webinar, and we're going to move directly to our very first presenter. I'll ask Dr. Pernessa Steele if she will introduce herself, and we will begin our discussion with her. Dr. Steele?
Good afternoon, Bishop, and to all of Bishop Rhetoric and to all the College of Bishops. Thank you so much for having me. I am Pernessa Steele, and I am the founder and the CEO of the Balm in Gilead. I'm also an immunologist by design. I am not a practicing immunologist today, but in my past, I have been on the front line of doing immunology work at Rockefeller University, malaria research, cancer research at Sloan Kettering, and of course, 31 years of addressing HIV and other health disparities. As the founder and CEO of the Balm in Gilead, we have been leading and in partnership with the CMEs and other African-American denominations on how to address life-threatening diseases, of which COVID-19 is one. And I want to lift up that I'm sorry to hear the passing of Bishop Cunningham, because Bishop Cunningham, before he was a bishop, was very much supportive and involved, engaged with the Balm in Gilead. So God bless him as he moves on into the great eternal life. So thank you so much for having me today, Bishop Snorton.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you for reminding us of Bishop Cunningham's engagement, because that is what this conversation is intended to help all of us do, and that's get engaged. We want to ask you to draw on your science background and your experience as an immunologist and really help us understand exactly what is a virus and why is this particular coronavirus and the COVID-19 disease so contagious and so dangerous?
Well, I think that's a fundamental question, and that's a great question. What is a virus? A virus is a parasite. It's a microscopic parasite. It is different from a bacteria. It's a microscopic virus. And this particular, the coronavirus, this is, we have had several coronaviruses. SARS is a coronavirus. The common cold is caused by a coronavirus. But this particular virus, COVID-19, coronavirus 19, you hear it's a novel virus because it's the first time that this virus has actually entered into the human body. This is the first time this virus has evolved from an animal into the human body. And it's so contagious and dangerous because the body does not have an immune system to it. We don't have any antibodies to it. So for instance, if we get a cold, it's most time a cold does not kill us because our body is immune. We have antibodies. We may get some sniffling and we may say we have a very bad cold, but our body over years and decades has built up an immune to the coronavirus that causes common cold. But this novel coronavirus, COVID-19, it's new to the human body, and therefore we do not have a vaccine, we do not have a treatment. Every week we are learning more and more about the disease. It's new. If you recall in the beginning, they said it was just going to affect older adults. But then now we know that it also affects children. So every day, we are learning more and more about this virus. But the one takeaway is that this is a new virus that has entered into the human population, it has evolved from animals into the human population. And the human body does not have an immune system to it yet.
Well, thank you for that. That's very clear and very helpful. Could you also say a word about the incubation period? And we've heard a lot of talk on TV about being asymptomatic, yet you're contagious. Tell us what all that means in layman's terms so we can understand.
So asymptomatic means I have the virus, but I do not have any symptoms. So you can have contracted this virus, but you don't have any fever. You're not having any. You're not coughing. You're not having any hallucinations, because those are some of the signs of COVID-19. And so even though you don't have any of the symptoms, you're still able to transmit the virus, because this is an airborne virus. This is an airborne virus. Unlike HIV, HIV is not airborne. You have to, HIV is bloodborne. It's you got to get it into your either saliva or through a bodily fluid is how HIV is transmitted. So it's not in the air. This virus, like the common cold virus, coronavirus, it is in the air. It is airborne, which is why we wear masks. But so symptoms, you may have some symptoms, you may not have some symptoms. And, most times when we get a sniffle or a cough, what do we say? Where did I get this cough from? I don't know, it must be a bug, because we are so accustomed to getting a bug and it's a common cold, but we don't think it's going to kill us. So, understand that you may have this virus and not have any symptoms. That's called asymptomatic, but you can spread the virus just by talking to someone, just by singing to someone. So when you are in close proximity, then, you can get it just by us talking together, which is why wearing a mask is so important. Because if I have a mask on and I have the virus, and you have a mask on and you don't have the virus, then hopefully the transmission of the virus is decreased significantly.
So given that we don't have any antibodies, because this is a new virus, and that it's highly contagious and you can have it and not know it, how then can we really go about protecting our people in our churches when we reopen? You've already mentioned masks. What are some of the other ways we might need to be thinking and actually implementing as best practices?
Well, thank you, Bishop. I want to echo Bishop Rhetoric and just thank him for his leadership on this opening, whether to open or reopen. I think the one thing we have to actually be very clear about is the protection of our congregants. We have to be committed. Keyword on committed and keyword on intentional, okay? When we look at the virus, we know the virus is not over. It is increasing. It's increasing particularly in the South, particularly where South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Arkansas, Texas, Florida, all over the country, but we are seeing spikes. We're seeing spikes. We also know that African Americans are leading the death rate. We're leading the death rate, and we're leading those that have the virus. So with that, we know that we have to be intentional and committed to protecting our congregants and our community. Therefore, I want to join Bishop Rhetoric and say, we need to stay closed. We need to stay closed. And for those we now know, even for pastors who were reluctant, some pastors are really seeing a stronger ministry. Our ministry has gained in just its ability to minister. It's a new norm, and some of us are experiencing a stronger ministry. Some others are not. And I think this is also a time when we might be able to help those who are not so strong in this virtual ministry to get stronger. Now, having said that, when we think about reopening, we have to be committed, number one, to cleaning, disinfectant. We have to make sure not just let me go in here and sweep and vacuum, but we have to disinfect everything, every pew, every choir seat, the pulpit, everything that people come in contact with has to be disinfected, has to be cleaned with cleaning agents that's going to kill the coronavirus before ministry and after ministry. Very important. Intentional cleaning. We must also become intentional about people wearing masks. So we have to be protecting, understand the virus is right there. You know, we've lost so many in our congregations because, you know, we believe in prayer, but we also have to believe in action, wisdom, action. So we have to make sure that everybody who comes to church has a mask. Everybody who enters the sanctuary have a mask. If they didn't bring a mask with them, we have to have masks available. We have to make sure we may decide whether or not we're going to take people's temperatures. That's a pro and a con. You may want to take people's temperature before they, enter into the sanctuary or not. But basically, people must wear a mask. They must social distance. You may not want to do responsive readings because, responsive readings, you have to talk more and more. And the more you talk and the more you sing, the more the opportunity is for the virus, if you have a virus, to spread to someone else. So we have to get clear about our worship as well. We may not want to, the responsive reading may be someone is singing and responsive reading is silent. So all of those, how long the service goes, because of the airborne of this virus, it is very important that the less we say, the better. We also know now about these masks, you can get hot. Wearing these masks, sometimes it is hot. Sometimes you feel like, oh my God, I gotta take this mask off because I can barely walk through the store with the mask on. That's real on what we are experiencing these days. So we have to take that in consideration as well. I'm gonna stop there because I think that's the main piece. We make also the mask, the cleaning. You will get to decide whether you want to go the next distance in terms of everybody wearing gloves or taking temperature, but definitely intentional cleaning before and after everything, not just a vacuum, not just a wipe down, but an intentional disinfected cleaning of everything. And everybody entering the church must have on a mask, and we have to limit the speaking conversation because that's the number one way this virus is transmitted.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. It's very apparent that if we're going to reopen and do it safely, we've got to exercise a lot of discipline and take a lot of precautions. Dr. Steele is our science expert and our health expert today. So if you have a question for her, we may have time for her to answer one or two questions. Put those questions in the Q&A section and we'll see if we can get to them. Dr. Steele, we've heard a lot about the health disparities that are causing or making this virus so much more lethal for us. What can the church do about addressing the health disparities, and what precautions might we take with our more vulnerable membership?
Well, you're singing my song now, because the balm in Gilead, as you know, Bishop Thornton, you've been with us for so long, and all of the bishops in this session, you've been with us, and we thank you for your support and your leadership. Our mission is to work with every church that's leading the spirituality of Black people. We must have an intentional engagement of people with their health disparities. We are dying because we have more hypertension, diabetes, obesity, the whole nine. You know, we have got to become intentional around our health ministries, because when something like a novel virus comes, you know, you see who is going to affect the most because of our health disparities. When you look at a disease like Alzheimer's, you know, who gets more Alzheimer's than anybody else? African Americans. We now know why, because we are experiencing chronic diseases throughout our life, so that when we get in our elder ages, the disease, the brain disease, is able to affect us more, impact us more, because of the chronic diseases we have lived with all of our lives. So we must, the church, we must really be engaged from the cradle all the way through the lifespan about our health. We must make sure that there are people in our congregations that are connected to public health institutions, connected to the Balm and Gilead, that's going to provide continuous resources every single week to make sure that our people get information, get knowledge, because without knowledge, we have nothing. We have to get knowledge, and then we must act on the knowledge that we have.
Some of the questions that are coming up have to do with the disinfecting process. One is asking about spraying. Another question is asking about repetitive use of hand sanitizers. And another question is asking about particularly sanitizing bathrooms, and should all the bathrooms now go to touchless hardware? Can you kind of summarize a response for those kinds of questions?
Yes, I'll do my best. And I want to encourage everyone to go to your own device and find what the scientists, what CDC is actually saying on this. What we know, my simple response is that we know that when you look at a can of Lysol, it says kill the coronavirus, okay? But we're not just talking about a spray. We're talking about an intentional wipe down. You know, the Clorox Lysol wipe. We're talking about a wipe down. So we must, you know, get the information. You have a list of disinfectants now that are available on the CDC site, available to you. Go and get the information of what disinfectants and what do you need to do to clean your facilities. In terms of hand sanitizers, I think that's an individual piece, you know, because being in public health, you know, you always know that there's always a conversation, a pro and con conversation for everything, you know. So I always have a hand sanitizers in my car, because when I go into the store, I come back out, I take my hand sanitizers. But when I'm able to wash my hands, I don't think I've washed my hands so many times in my life. I'm washing my hands at least 20 times every single day. So, you know, you decide whether you want to use the hand sanitizers or not. But for me, I'm so concerned after I have touched something, touched the grocery cart or whatever, I have something in my car that I feel is helping me until I get home. And once I get home, I'm going to wash my hands with soap and water. And I'm going to do what Sanjay Gupta taught me, how to wash my hands. And we also now know the Balm and Gilead put out about a month ago that we wash and pray. But wash your hands the length of the time it takes you to say the Lord's Prayer. So that's how, you know, we have to see this.
Another question asked about steam cleaning. Is steam cleaning effective? And if the church has been closed for some time, how necessary is it? Is there any likelihood that the virus would still be alive on surfaces?
If the church has been closed for, you know, since March, it's unlikely that the virus itself would be there. However, dust might be there. Dust is probably there. So when you're talking about a lot of people, you know, who have already compromised immune system, and when we say compromised immune system, we're talking about diabetes, hypertension, cancer, and all of those diseases that we have so much of. coming into a facility that has, dust and whatever else may have been there, because, things, but, it's like an old house. When you close up a house, you go back in, all kind of things that decide to live in there. So you might, asthma may kick in because of the dust, or something else may kick in that will affect your body to then trigger the opportunity for the virus to come in when you go to the store. Or maybe you see your daughter or your grandson or your husband. Everybody, we're all moving around, and we're all in community. So even though your church has been closed, there are other germs and bacteria and parasites that are living there that may trigger the human response, the body's response, that would help you become more susceptible to the coronavirus if you come in contact with it. I hope I'm making myself clear.
That makes sense. Even if the church has been closed, it should be clean. And with that, another question asked was, does that include cleaning your air handler, air conditioning, ventilation system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that I cannot stress enough that when I say clean, I'm talking about deep cleaning, and deep cleaning consistently. We now know that the virus has transmitted in restaurants through the air conditioning system. So we have some science now that says you have to clean the filters in your air condition, the heating, whatever. You have to deep clean, and you have to deep clean constantly. So the planning of opening is very, very, very important. And I'm just really happy that the CME Church is taking the leadership on this, because we just can't open. We have to plan, and plan.
Dr. Steele, thank you so much. It was very helpful. We need to move on to our next presenter. The last question that was asked, or another question that was asked, was about recommendations and resources. You mentioned the CDC, and there's guidance on the CDC website, www.cdc.gov. And there are also several links on the CME Church's website, www.thecmechurch.org. So for
Bishop, there's also balmandgilead.org. We have resources particularly for the church on COVID-19.
Thank you. So and that's balmandgilead.org.
balmandgilead.org.
So for those of you who are looking for things in writing, please refer to those various websites where you'll find all kinds of resources that will reinforce and restate what Dr. Steele has shared with us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Steele. Now, it's my pleasure to present my colleague, Bishop James B. Walker, who will host our next presenter.
All right. At this time, I will have Attorney Timothy Maupin come before us. And Attorney Maupin, would you please say a word about yourself? And I think that one of the things we might do is just hear what you have to say about the COVID-19 era that we're in and what the legal implications are. But please say a word about yourself, sir, as a lifelong CME.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Bishop Walker said, I'm lifelong CME member. I've only been a member of BB Church. I remember back when I was a kid, Sylvia Falk got me to sing in what we call the morning glories. So that was kind of my first exposure to service way back when I was real young. And even got a scholarship from BB to go to the University of Pennsylvania, where I graduated in economics from the Wharton School of Business. And then been attending BB when I came back to law school out here in Berkeley. So it's truly my home church, and I'm honored to serve it. So, but today, as Bishop Walker asked me to do, I was going to talk a little bit about the CDC guidance and recommendations that are out there on reopening churches and communities of faith, and go over some best practices. I know Dr. Steele has mentioned a few, but there are many, many more out there. There's a lot out there. But as he was saying, churches have been identified as one of the higher risk areas for transmission of the virus. Singing, talking, hugging, all of our social interactions that are normal are now not allowed anymore. It's a very, as we were saying, a new normal. So as she did say, we should stay close, but that's one of the CDC guidelines, is to offer options, remote participation. Facebook, Vimeo we're using, you can do what we're doing now, Zoom, you can do telephone conferences. And they also consider small groups. That used to be a way we did things back in the day, where you don't have to come into church, you keep your small groups together. And under current guidelines, it's okay to have a small bubble of people meet. And that, that's probably one of the options people want to consider before they do come back. And if we do come back, there's certain things that we need to consider to protect the people in the high risk groups. And those are the people, the seniors, those with underlying medical conditions, not only protect them, but to protect their privacy about their condition and offer options for them. So there's a lot to think about when you're reopening, especially, and as I'm speaking from a national level, the local guidelines. You got to consider the local guidelines too, whether you can reopen. CDC may make these guidances and recommendations, but your localities may prevent you from reopening. So that has to be considered as well. And then, do you want to reopen all of your facilities? That's another, before you even get to what to do to reopen, how much are you going to reopen? You're going to reopen to the congregation? You're going to go back to your normal childcare facility, your rental operations? Maybe those things have to be shut down for a while. Those are things that the CDC recommends you consider. Actually, they tell you initially, no childcare, no rental facilities, but if you do, make sure that those who share your use of facilities follow the recommendations and guidelines that you adopt.
May I ask you a question? Because
Sure.
You said something. You said rental. I'm not asking you to give legal advice, but speak to us in a legal framework about if we have facilities that we rent, what are the implications of that? Say we have one set of standards, we're going to abide by the CDC set of guidelines. What if the renter says, we have faith in God, Lord will take care of us, we're going to pray and fast, and we're going to enter our facility? Now, what do I, as a landlord, what's my responsibility if the church is a landlord?
If the church is a landlord, the church is ultimately responsible under premises liabilities theory of liability. So that group would either have to give you a waiver of liability, or you would not allow them to use the facility.
Okay.
So,
okay. So then we have some responsibility to look at what our tenants might be doing. Okay.
right. Yeah, you have to look at that. Would be determined, but the lease will give you hopefully an option. Basically, most leases, standard leases, have a provision that requires you to comply with all laws, rules, and regulations of local, city, government agencies. So what you're doing is in compliance with these emergency orders, these emergency regulations. So that will give you protection to, prohibit them from using them without following the guidelines as well.
All right. Would you please respond to this for me? Say I am in a congregation that is small, and we don't have a lot of resources, and we wonder whether or not the CDC guidelines would apply to us equally as they might apply to a larger congregation. And sometimes we might look at those guidelines and say, well, that's what larger congregations have to do. But we all know each other. We're basically family. We don't necessarily have to abide by the CDC guidelines. As an attorney, how do you advise, not advise, but what do you have to share with us about those situations?
These are not binding guidelines. You can't force someone, as my mom used to say, you can, lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. So these are the guidelines, and if you don't want to follow them, then you're at risk. And then there's not much you can do to compel someone to use common sense.
Okay.
So,
do we have a duty to uphold to some standard as operators of these facilities?
we do now. Yeah, the government is imposing a duty upon us by these recommendations and these shutdown orders to not reopen until it's safe. So.
Say more about that. The government is imposing these duties upon us. Say more about what that means.
Well, yeah, that's what the emergency orders have done. It requires, as Dr. Steele was saying, if you're going to reopen, you have to make sure your facilities are clean and safe in a clean and safe environment. So that requires deep cleaning, that requires a scheduled maintenance, that requires temperature checks, that requires system to collect, registration of the people attending, so you can do your contact tracing in case the government agency finds an outbreak, or I should say an instance of the virus in your congregation. So there are many requirements that have been imposed upon us by these emergency regulations that are new to churches.
Okay, you made lights go off. You said registration. What is that all about? Is that something I need to be aware of as a pastor, as a congregation?
You should, yeah. The CDC recommends, in order to promote, or I should say, help with the containment, we need to know information about our congregants. They want us to keep a registration of the attendees. And as Dr. Steele was saying, sometimes do a temperature check. It's not required by the CDC, but you're supposed to check for signs and symptoms of the virus. So that's one of the ways to do so. And that's to do the temperature check. And then you keep that information in the church for 3 weeks in case the local agency or the federal government comes to find out there was a instance of the virus in the congregation on that particular day. So they will have to come get your information and go contact all of the congregants that were there that day, have them get tested and make them quarantine. So.
Right. We have some questions for you, and that is, do you recommend that local churches should consider legal waivers for visitors entering churches, or maybe for period? Should we consider waivers?
Yes, that's the short answer. Yes. All of my clients are considering waivers. I'm drafting one for some now. So yes, that would be a good idea. If you decide to open up, whether you do it every time or do it for your members only once, that's a decision you'll have to make. But once is probably enough for your members, but for visitors, you're probably gonna have to do it every time they enter.
Okay, here is a question. Can a congregation be liable for someone coming into one of our churches and contracting the virus? Do congregations need to have a disclaimer or waiver to protect themselves? Similar, but can we be held liable in addition to the waiver issue?
want to say it's a loaded question. You can be sued. You can be sued. I will say that. Yeah, you can be caught up in a lawsuit if someone does contract the virus and they determine that you haven't implemented safety procedures. There is a lack of cleaning, disinfectant, ventilation, etc. There wasn't social distancing. Yeah, you can be sued for someone contracting the virus in your church.
Okay. I'll just try to combine these two questions together. And that is, what is your advice on parking lot worship services, and is ventilation a big issue, HVAC systems?
Drive-in services are an option. Those are safe, considered acceptable, and a great alternative to, indoor worship. So I would, if you're considering drive-in services, that's a great idea. HVAC is a huge issue. As Dr. Steele was saying, you need to clean the ventilation system. It's got to be properly sanitized, and the filters need to be changed often. And if you don't have proper ventilation system in the church, you got to make sure the windows and doors are open safely. But there has to be as much outdoor air as possible circulating through the building if you're indoors. So HVAC is a big issue.
This is good information. I'm going to try to summarize. If somebody can prove that they were exposed to COVID-19 while in our services, is there a liability for the local church or the CME church at large? And how will providers view their liabilities?
There is exposure to liability if, as I said, the standards were not followed. If you haven't implemented proper procedures to protect and safeguard the congregants. And even if you do, that's still not going to stop someone from claiming that you're responsible. So hopefully it should be covered by most insurance policies.
Okay.
As long as you're not negligent. As I said, if you're taking the proper steps and exercising duty of care, then you're going to be covered. But if you haven't done anything to minimize the exposure, then maybe you're not. So that depends. That's a factual question.
Okay.
And that's why it's important, as Dr. Steele was saying, to promote the social distancing, clean, disinfect, have plenty of sanitizer on hand, make sure people are washing their hands. And we didn't get into this, but if you're going to open, you got to close common areas. You're going to have to stop with the collection plates. No more of that. No more sharing. Handshakes. There's going to be a different norm in the church. You can't allow people to congregate in common areas after church, even in the parking lot. And it's going to be a different environment for a lot of people.
So you're saying, if I'm one of those persons who says my faith says that I have enough faith to believe that I can shake your hand, that I may be getting the church into some liability issues. But here are a few more questions because I know our time is coming to a close. Can we demand that people wear masks? What are the legal guidelines to giving away hot plate lunches or boxed, perishable, and non-perishable items? We just put those two together.
Sure. Yes, you can demand that people wear masks because, as I said, it's an emergency regulation, and that's a national issue. I think it's a national, well, it's maybe not a national order, but at least locally here in California, it is required. So you can require that. Food service is discouraged. Prepackaged options especially for communion, no more common cups, bread. Got to go with prepackaged. If you have it, well, you need to get it. If you don't have it, if you're going to reopen, prepackaged communion bread service, and no more buffet style food or family style meals. That's how.
You hurt my heart right there, but but thank you so much. Thank you for telling us the hard truth. We appreciate that. Thank you so very much. And now we place you back in the hands of Bishop Jefferson Snorton, and we also present the person who will co-facilitate with her this next session, and that is the Bishop Thomas Lewis Brown.
Thank you. That was very helpful. It's very apparent that we are going to have to work hard to implement change and embrace change out of love for one another, and not see this as a burden, but as an opportunity to really demonstrate what it means to be a loving Christian community. These changes will be hard, but they are necessary. We've brought together a group of pastors who have been, as many of you out there watching, been struggling with how to minister to the congregation during this pandemic. They have been using their creative energy to figure out what works and what does not work, and we are so glad that they have joined us today to share from their expertise. Bishop Thomas Brown and I will alternate between asking them questions, and we'll allow them to introduce themselves as well. And then if there's time at the end, we will see if we can have some open questions from the audience. So Bishop Brown, would you begin with our very first pastor panelist?
Yes, thank you, Bishop Jefferson Snorton, and greetings to each of you. If I may, I have one question for Attorney Mopping. If I may quickly ask this and then move to the question of the pastors. It appears to me from hearing you, sir, that you may be suggesting that every congregation, every pastor perhaps needs to have some consultation with legal counsel before reopening.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, I would recommend consulting, with the local attorney, for sure.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
The first question,
especially on the way. Sorry, especially if you're going to be asking for a waiver, you want to have that drafted by a lawyer.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Pastors, talk to us about the pressure that you feel as a leader of a congregation to return, and the pressure to also give leadership in terms of how quickly that process takes place. To either of you, panelists?
Perhaps we should have the panelists introduce themselves first.
Yes, that would be good. Thank you.
We have Reverend Terry Wheat.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to share some information that I have about COVID. I'm from the 3rd Episcopal District, where my bishop is Bishop Sylvester Williams, and I attend the J. Claude Allen CME Church in Dixmoor. My background is I'm a retired registered nurse and have held positions as a nurse surveyor for the Joint Commission, chief nursing officer for a large institution, and associate chief nursing officer. My main background has been in pediatrics. And so I also have a background in public health. So thank you for allowing me to come and share.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Reverend Jeremy Williams. Would you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I am Jeremy L. Williams. I am lead pastor of the Phyllis Metropolitan CME Church in Hartford, Connecticut, in the 7th Episcopal District, where I'm currently serving under Bishop James B. Walker. And it's good to be on this panel with my ordaining bishop, Bishop Jefferson Snorton.
Oh, thank you. Reverend Valencia Edner.
Good afternoon. I am Reverend Valencia Edner, and I'm the pastor of the Miles Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church in Houston, Texas, in the 8th Episcopal District, where Senior Bishop is my presiding prelate. I'm grateful and honored to be a part of this panel of persons who will discuss what's important for our churches. Thank you.
All right, Reverend Dr. Jimmy Washington.
Good afternoon, everyone. I pastor Philip Temple in Dayton, Ohio, and grateful to be a part of this discussion about reopening our churches. And I've just been encouraged by the information that I have heard again today.
And last but certainly not least, we're welcoming Reverend Dr. DeAndre Thurman as our panelist.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Bishop. My name is DeAndre Thurman. I am the pastor of the St. Paul CME Church in Savannah, Georgia, where my presiding bishop is Bishop Thomas L. Brown, the 6th Episcopal District. Prior to my going into full-time ministry, I was a registered respiratory therapist and a supervisor of respiratory care, and also I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for a number of years. And so I am certainly honored and excited to be a part of this panel.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bishop Brown, you have the list of questions that we have for each of our panelists.
Yes, so thank you all for sharing who you are. I raise my question again. What pressure or pressures are you under as a pastor to return to your sanctuaries and to your ministries and your facilities? And how are you handling the pressure of taking that in a very methodical process in terms of when you reopen and how you reopen?
Well, I can say something to that, Bishop. One of the, of course, as a pastor and leading people, there's a bit of urgency that we need. But one thing that has been really helpful for my thinking is I did a congregation-wide survey, and I recognized that from the data there, 64% of the congregation, if we open up the church in next month, stated that they would prefer virtually. So that's an interesting piece of data that I think is helpful if we can get some information from our congregations to see how they feel about safety, that can help to take some of the pressure off, although we are considering some ways to do some hybrid approaches to come in the building, but that is one approach. The survey took a little bit of pressure off that. A lot of the congregants aren't rushing to get back into the building.
This is Jimmy Washington. I likewise did several surveys. It's very, very interesting. Our attendance runs between 850 to 1,000 with 2 services each week. And we, in our survey, about 1/3 said that they would return on the first week that we would reopen, whenever that date would be. But there is a hesitancy among the membership, because basically, you know, the way this COVID-19 has affected our community and the way that it's been spoken of in the media, I think we have gotten across that our Black people in America are our risk factor is much greater than that of the larger culture. So I don't sense a lot of pressure within the congregation. It's amazing. When I first started pastoring at Phillips 27 years ago, the average church member went to church 3 times a month. That was a standard. Across the country. Black church, white church, didn't matter. That the average member went to church 3 Sundays, only missed 1 Sunday. Well, now it's less than 2 times a month. So you can be a leader in your church, a servant in your church, someone who gives regularly, and only come to church less than twice a month. So to get 1,000 people today a week requires a much larger congregation than it did 30 years ago. Almost twice as much, because people have come to church much less. So I don't see it. I don't sense any pressure within the congregation to do it. It's probably more driven just from myself and my understanding of ministry. You know, I miss God's people so much. I I mean, it's just incredible. And it's just not, I'm just not hearing it myself. I'm hearing that throughout the congregation, that we long to be with each other. We long to worship, long to fellowship with each other. So, I'm grateful that I'm not feeling any pressure. Matter of fact, and I'll stop talking at this. I've been amazed at how faithful the church has been in this. You know, financially, we're ahead financially. You know. You can't go, but I think one of the questions I'm going to address is how do we really figure out how many people we reach? But if we just go by the hits, the number of hits, the number of views each week, man, I'm seeing many, many more views. However, I'm cautioned because that's not an actual, you can't really determine how many people are reaching through views. But you know, it's been a great experience in so many ways.
So most of you have migrated, as you've indicated, to this virtual world of worship, and people seem to have adjusted to it. I'm wondering, let me direct this question to Reverend Thurman. I'm wondering, how have you seen liturgy change, and how do you envision those changes in the future as we envision reopening, or maybe even having both a virtual and a live service?
Thank you, Bishop Snorton. I would offer and agree with Dr. Washington. We are seeing a lot of hits on our internet worship services, but what we recognize is that people are very transient as they stop by our worship experiences. And so one of the things that I've learned, and one of the things I believe many of us has learned, is that we have to make sure that we have the key and critical components of worship as a part of our liturgy, but they may not be as extended or as elongated as they have been when we're traditionally in the sanctuary. And so prayer and preaching and the opportunity to participate in giving are most critical. Some of the other things that we would typically do, responsive readings and other things that may extend worship, we've had to look at how can we reduce those so that we can make sure that we reach our people and we reach them effectively during this time. And so one of the things we've tried to do is to reduce everything, even as we look to perhaps moving back into the sanctuary, for we know that the longer we stay together, the more risk we have for exposure. We've tried to reduce everything to less than 1 hour.
Excellent. And Reverend Wheat, I missed a question earlier. Forgive me, but we're curious as to how can we take the massive CDC guidelines or guidance and make them plain and applicable to our congregations?
Well, Bishop, that's a great question, because there is so much information out there. The first thing is that people should understand where to go online to see these CDC guidelines. And what I've done is I've looked at them, and I think I can give you like 4 top things, 4 practical tips on how to protect yourself. And so the first thing is we need to wash our hands. And we did hear Dr. Steele say that, but we need to wash our hands. That's so important. And we need to do it for the 20 seconds that is recommended. And if we don't have any soap and water, we should at least use a hand sanitizer that's at least 70% alcohol based. And, you know, like after going to the grocery store and things like that, we need to wash our hands. If we're sneezing or coughing or blowing our nose, we need to wash our hands. We need to remember that it's not necessarily the amount of soap you're putting on your hands, it's the friction that you're using to wash your hands that's important. The second thing I would suggest is that keep a minimum of 6 feet. I know people keep saying, oh, I'm 6 feet. Well, if you can get 7 feet, that's even better. So it's a minimum of 6 feet that we need to stay a safe distance from each other. I would say the third thing that I would recommend that they've given us as a guide, and that is wear your non-surgical mask for anyone who is 2 years old or older. Now, if you have emphysema and you can't breathe, that's a different story. But if you're 2 years old and older, you should wear your mask. And I'll tell you why. There's a good slide or information on the CDC website that says, if the person is a carrier and I'm the healthy person and I have on a mask and that carrier does not have on a mask and they talk to me and we're discussing, I have a 70% chance, a probability of getting COVID. Now, let's say the carrier has on a mask and I'm the healthy person and I don't. The probability of me getting this COVID is about 5%. Now, if we both have on masks, the person who has COVID and me, the healthy person, it reduced to about 1.5% probability of me getting COVID. But if you notice, it's not zero. It's not zero. So please wear your mask. I think also that you should be familiar with signs and symptoms of COVID. And I think everybody knows them. But you should know when to call the 911. And so if you're having trouble breathing, if you have a persistent pain or pressure in your chest, if you, some of us are confused, but if we have new confusion, if we have the inability to wake or stay awake, or if we have bluing of our lips, you need to call 911. Don't mess around with it, call. And then I would say the last thing that I think that's important is cleaning and disinfecting. Cleaning is you're getting rid of dirt. Disinfecting is more, I'm getting rid of germs. So the CDC has lots of information on their website, and they say that, you should, when you are cleaning, after you clean with soap and water and you're disinfecting, you should look at your bleach, make sure that your bleach, and that's one of the things that they're suggesting, is that your bleach is not expired. Read the labels on it. They are suggesting that you put a gallon of room temperature water with 1/3 cup of bleach to make your solution. And that solution can be used to wipe down areas and things. We would say, some people say more is better. Well, more can be toxic. So if the CDC is suggesting 1 gallon of water with 1/3 cup of bleach, don't put a gallon of bleach in a little bit of water. Do what they say. They also have on their website, they have a link to the EPA where you can actually put in the registration number of your cleaning product, and it will tell you what viruses or what things it will destroy. And it also tells you what the wet time is. And so usually the wet time is about 1 minute. If the Lysol spray is 2 minutes, you need to look at the wipes, that might be longer. So educate yourself. Try to stay at a distance from other people because this is a serious matter here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. That's some very rich information. Thank you for sharing that from your medical background. One of the controversial parts of the CDC recommendations that I don't know whether it ended up staying in or out of the official recommendations, but is around this issue of singing. Reverend Edner, would you say a word about singing, and what is the role of singing in worship in view of this pandemic? What do we need to know about choirs and congregational singing?
Thank you, Bishop Jefferson Norton. One of the things that we are finding that is really an issue is our needing to sing congregationally and to feel that connection to one another. It is deeply discouraged that we sing congregationally. The amount of aspiration needed for singing, the aerosol effect that happens with singing is just under shouting. And so therefore it is important that there not be 6 or 7 feet between persons who are singing, but more like 10 to 12. And so it's a difficult thing for us because singing is such a viable part of our worship experience, but we're going to have to learn how to let leaders sing who are following the distancing, and I won't even call it social. I'll call it necessary distance, the essential distance for singing. And then those of us who will be in the pews, that we learn the wonderful art of singing along with people, either internally or that humming becomes our new norm, because well, I call it the new abnormal, because it's not going to feel normal. It's not going to feel like what we're used to. If coming together is essential for us at some point, then we're going to have to, until there's a vaccine, until there is a protocol for healing, we're going to have to deal with the fact that congregational singing is going to be discouraged. Even when people are in the same family, and I know that that's one of the questions, we got to still be careful that sitting near each other, everyone's not, people are going to work every day, and so therefore everyone's not absolutely shut down. So you've got to be careful about that close distance. There are just several things that go along with this. The masks are absolutely necessary. Masks are absolutely necessary throughout service. So if you're singing congregationally, there's a restriction of your airflow and the oxygen that you can receive. So you will see that singers often do not sing, those lead singers don't sing in mass because they really can't and survive it. The inhalation and exhalation that is necessary to continue to sing can't be done behind a mask. You know how hard it is, like someone said earlier, in a grocery store or anywhere else. If you do that and you're trying to inhale and exhale, it is going to become a respiratory ailment issue for the person who is trying to sing. So we have to be very, very conscious, very intentional. I've heard that word. That's a really good word for this. Very intentional about what we do. Yes, you need a measuring tape. You need to be sure that there is enough space between people. And I cannot impress upon us the importance of the maintenance of the worship tools, microphones, stands, the whole microphone, not just the head of it. Those can be unscrewed and cleaned, and it has to be done consistently. The instruments wiped down. It doesn't matter whether the same person is playing it every week. We don't know necessarily if someone has had to come through to prepare for something else. So you want to make sure that each of the instruments are completely wiped down and cleaned. There may be some other questions, but that distance between the singers who are leading, same thing with the preacher who is preaching. No one can sit in the first row. I don't care how far you think the row is away, because when the preacher is preaching and gets too high, we are an African American church for the most part. Many of us preach in an African American style. That's where our homiletics is. And so therefore we have to be very careful that the people in the first row, that there can be no one there. We have to do our social distancing beyond the first row for our congregants. I hope that answered that question. And if there's anything else, please, I'm willing to discuss it.
Say a word about using technology to provide music and services.
Okay. Let's talk about, many people are using Zoom. I do want you to know that it is almost absolutely impossible unless you have a timing mechanism to line up singing on a virtual platform. It is actually a mess. I hate to say it quite like that, but it's a mess when we try to do it. And if you don't care about that mess, then go for it. But if you do care, then that means that someone has to do the singing, knowing that there is a delay, so it will not line up voice to visual. That won't happen. But then there's the wonderful art of taping and videotaping music, and then using it as a shared screen in the platform, in the online platform, as well as when you are doing it in other. If you're able to tape, if you're able to do some of the more I'll call them difficult. They're really not difficult. They're just very time consuming, and they require engineering. As you've seen, these people who have like multiple people singing at the same time on a Zoom. That's a process. I want to thank the Connection Music and Arts ministry team, because we've talked about this extensively, and especially Reverend Dolly Pankey for her expertise in these areas, because as we are watching and listening to all of these guidelines, there are some that have to be really specifically understood. But singing on the platform, one person, yes. People who are in the same place, singing, yes. But that singing congregationally on a Zoom platform is, or something like that, not going to be viable for your worship experience. Let me say one last thing. There are some people who are taping their entire services. If that really works for you, that is the cleanest way to make sure that there are no glitches, that there's no problem, and that you can have that kind of virtual worship experience with music intact. Those of us who are still doing it live, we know what that means, but that means we have to absolutely use those kinds of social distancing to make sure, more than social distancing, to make sure it works.
Excellent. It seems to me that if I were a pastor, I would be delaying. But anyway, Reverend Williams, could you say a word about the challenges we may have and creativity may be involved in integrating an internet audience with our more traditional worship experiences?
Thank you for that question, Bishop. I believe that it's really important in these moments that we don't see this moment of social distancing for churches as a hurdle that we have to hop over, but instead we see it as a chrysalis or a cocoon that we're going to evolve through. And that's important because many of us are waiting to get back to what used to be or to that traditional moment, and will forsake our virtual congregants that we have gained in this time. I know that from my seat, my colleague on the call can say that there have been people who've been able to tune into worship, give, participate, and be a part of our worship experience and be a part of the church that have joined. And that it's important that we make sure that we don't neglect them as we are hurrying to get back into the building, that we make sure that we are actively keeping up these methods, because these methods aren't going to go away after this COVID-19 pandemic is over. It's still a way to outreach. These are still going to be tools that we can use. And so to that end, as many of you know, part of my thinking around this is in the book Wireless Discipleship, that is significant that as congregations and as preachers and thinkers, that we recognize that doing discipleship wirelessly is not something new, but it's at the heart of what the church is. That's what Paul writing letters to congregations all across Asia Minor and elsewhere. That's wireless relationship, virtual pastoring. And so to that end, it's not us actually doing something new, but it's a moment for us to actually archaeologically dig up, excavate some of our past and history of the church. And so to that end, it's to me very important that we make sure that those virtual disciples or those online members of our cyber sanctuaries, they feel welcome as we are contemplating moving forward. So does that mean that our investments in technology, our investments in how we have these 1 hour worship services that Dr. Thurman was talking about, we're going to have to actually consider how we still integrate that for those virtual worshipers who may not be in our near vicinity. They may be watching across the country or even literally around the world. And so to that end, we have to say, okay, they are participating in our worship in this way. So how do we make sure that we curate an experience that they can still be a part of it while we are moving live? And that may mean that our live experience has to continue to evolve. So rather than us thinking that this is a moment for us just to jump out of, but this is a moment for us to actually reimagine how liturgy works, how worship works. Because the hard fact about this is that we are not getting out of this really in the next couple of months or in a couple of seasons. And so some of the challenges that people want to delay until it's safe, and it may not be safe for a year until next summer when a vaccine has arrived. And so it's our job as people of faith to actually think of ways that we can drive through this gray, to actually say we're growing in this. We're not just trying to survive, but we're thriving, and we're doing more than thriving. We're evolving into the new future.
That's a great answer, Reverend Williams, and a great reminder that we should not see all of these things that we're doing as temporary, but as reimagining and remodeling what we've been doing. Reverend Dr. Washington, your church has a whole lot of ministries in addition to that Sunday worship service. How are you continuing and developing your ministries like discipleship, outreach, and so forth during the pandemic, and even moving forward with restrictions? How do you envision continuing the other ministries of the church, or what are you doing currently?
Thank you, Bishop. That's a great question, and I also neglected to let you all know that I serve in the 2nd Episcopal District under the marvelous leadership of Bishop Marvin Frank Thomas, and I'm grateful to be his chief steward, amen, in the life of his ministry here. Well, we do have a lot going on. One of the things, let me talk about the future, because we were doing, internet television, internet worship before this took place. So we're grateful that we had a ministry that had already launched into it, but we're doing a whole lot more as a result of it. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to hire a pastor. I'm going to hire a staff position whose job is to manage the online campus. So it's going to be somebody young who knows social media like the back of their hand. I'm going to pay them a salary to be our campus pastor, so that every ministry can have several apparatuses to touch bases with. Right now, we're using Zoom a whole lot for our meetings during the week. We have Sunday school classes on Zoom. We've got our young adult ministries on Zoom, youth meeting on Zoom, dance ministry, they're meeting on Zoom. So everybody is going through, even our prayer meetings. I'm usually in 3 prayer meetings a week, all of them are on Zoom, and we've had more attendance in them than we've had them at one of our locations. So what I'm going to do is, and I would hope other churches, if you can't pay a salary, you may have a young adult team of people that you give them that arena to develop their media ministry. When I told my media ministry when we began, I said we want to develop our online presence as though we will never be back in our building again. That was my marching orders to them, is that we want to develop our online ministries, our web-based ministry, as though this is the only way we will ever be able to reach our church and the world again. Now, I believe I'm more optimistic than many. I believe that things will return to normal. Maybe not in the next 6 months or mid next year, but there are signs that there will be. And some of the questions, you know what? If we are not comfortable singing at church, if that's really where we are, we don't need to come together. I think we need to stay at home. If you're not comfortable with people singing, I understand the issues. I think you ought to stay at home. I think we ought to continue to close our physical locations, because biblical worship requires singing. You can't worship biblically as a congregation without crying out to God. So if coming together is going to challenge us at that level, I think we need to stay closed. I think we need to have a mandate that we be closed. So those are just my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Another question I have, panelists, is if you could say a word about how you are designing ministry or carrying on ministry with people in terms of their emotional, physical health what might be some of the practices you have implemented to help us do care for people, even as we are dealing with virtual ministries?
I'll speak a little bit to that, Bishop. Not fully probably exploring that topic as much as we could, but one of the things we've tried to institute is we started having grief ministry online not too very long ago. And one of the things we tried to do to be creative was we asked all of those persons, we had a number in our church, but also in the community, who'd experienced the transition of a loved one during this period, and we weren't able to gather as we normally would. We asked them to bring their meal or their favorite meal with them to our Zoom meeting. And so we actually fellowshiped over a meal, almost in a virtual style. Brought in a counselor to talk about this idea of grief and the emotions that are surrounding the transition of a loved one during this time. And I'm looking for us to do more of that moving forward. In addition, I think that it's important that we also begin to think about how do we keep connected with people who are going through the transitions in life on a regular basis. Our men's group, we've tried to talk about some of the issues that come with relationships from a male perspective during this time. We're literally trying to make sure that we reach out to persons. Youth, we've tried to reach out to the youth in specific ways during this time. I think it's important that we be as creative as possible, that we bring outside voices in, and that we do our best to realize that this is all of this, the pandemic, and then of course, the social justice, civil rights issues that are occurring in our nation at this time are emotionally taxing. Mm-hmm. And as pastors, it's important that we address these issues and we do our best to address them on a regular basis.
Let me speak to that for a moment. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is because we had such a large number of deaths within the church, we began what we called Navigating Grief almost 2 years ago. And it has moved to the virtual platform during this season of pandemic. What we found is that grief has, of course, is not just about death. It's about any transition, any change, any anxiety, anything anyone is going through. And grief becomes such a strong emotion that people really don't know how to navigate through it. So we've tried to be a support group for one another. It's been a blessing to the membership prior to and also within it. I think that one of the things that we've learned to do is to utilize the creativity of the team of officers, those who are a part of the church. And one of the things that we've begun to do that may seem very simplistic, but it has made a difference in how the connectivity of our church feels, is that we do what we call caravans. And they call them Faith and Hope caravans. And we go from member to member, given if they're having a birthday. We've gone to see each of our elderly, those who are able to at least come to the door, and just to let them feel that connection. It goes a long way for their hearts, as well as just our connectivity as a church family. And those kinds of things, and the creative ways that we have trying to reach out to our youth and to our children. But I think the greatest thing that we have increased during this time is our prayer time together. And prayer has made a difference, that we have stepped up the prayer to not only early mornings and evenings, but also some noon days, so that we really are able to connect with the people as we continue, of course, with Bible study in the noon and in the evening. But it's absolutely necessary to do whatever we can to stay connected.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. We're winding down. I want to bring our two earlier presenters back into the discussion and give each one a question. Dr. Steele, Someone raised the question about members who may be pregnant, and are there special precautions that they may need to take around this COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Bishop. According to the CDC, there's no evidence that women with who are pregnant are passing the virus to their unborn child. That's what they are saying today. Now, remember, we are in a phase of learning about this virus. So as of today, the CDC is saying that there is no, outside of all the things that we have said that one needs to do, there's nothing that should be done, except the usual take care of, our pregnant sisters and make sure they do their prenatal stuff and all of that. But right now, the CDC says that there is no transmission of the virus from the mother to the unborn child.
Thank you. Attorney Maupin, let me ask you this question. We've been talking about congregation and congregational liability. Would you say a word about the general liability of the church for other meetings like district gatherings? We're moving into annual conference season. What kind of precautions should us as leaders take around scheduling meetings in the midst of a pandemic?
Thanks. Again, that's more probably, I probably want to consult with WIDA, General Counsel for the church on this, but yeah, my recommendation would be to limit personal contact and do everything remotely. So if we do try and meet in person and someone contracts the disease, they're obviously going to point to the host for setting up the meeting as a responsible party. So the the risk is pretty high that you will be caught up in a lawsuit and probably be held liable if that would happen. So unless the meeting is absolutely mandatory, I don't know that many are. I mean, there could be a few, but I would discourage that.
If I may follow up, Attorney Maupin, since we are a connectional church, would it be appropriate for the General Counsel to draw up a waiver that all of us could use, or is that too general?
No, that would be good. That would be a good idea. I mean, that would be effective. If everybody is voluntarily participating and have waived any potential liability, that's first level of protection.
Thank you. We are coming into our annual conference season, and one question that I've heard posed is, and this is to the pastors, what would you say to a pastor who is assigned to a new congregation at this year's annual conference? What advice would you give them?
Is that for me?
That's for any of the pastors.
Well, Bishop, I'll say certainly we're not in the role of assigning the pastor, so we're just in the role of being the pastor.
What would you, as a pastor, say to another pastor?
I think that one of the things that I would offer is that not only are you in a transitional period, but the church is in a transitional period, especially through what we're going through now. And so I think that one of the critical skills that we have as pastors, or hopefully we're developing, is the ability to listen. And so by whatever means that pastor has to hear the concerns, the heart of the congregation, obviously they may not be able to meet with them in person, but I would certainly recommend that in addition to their preaching and their teaching and their praying, that they do a great job of listening, maybe even developing a phone tree and a phone ministry, with the members of that church and just begin on a regular basis to interact in that way, since you would not have the opportunity to interact physically as you might under other circumstances.
All right. This has been a very informative discussion. I've gotten lots of ideas and some greater insight, and there are lots more questions. And I think one of the things that we're learning is that we have to become more comfortable living with the unknown, and not that we acquiesce to the unknown, but that we see this all these unknowns as an opportunity. As a denomination, we're going to do our very best to continue to resource you and keep you informed. Please make sure you've signed up for the text messaging and the emails blast system of the CME Church. You can do that on our website. And please check the website frequently for information and updates, as well as our Facebook page. With that said, I want to thank Dr. Steele, Attorney Maupin, Reverend Edner, Reverend Wheat, Reverend Dr. Washington, Reverend Dr. Thurman, and Reverend almost Dr. Jeremy Williams. Thank you all so much for your ministries, for your courage, for your wisdom and insight. And I'm now going to hand us back to our Senior Bishop Reddick, for our closing word. The recording will be available on the CME Church website, as well as on our Facebook page shortly after this webinar ends.
Thank you very much, Bishop Jefferson Snorton, and to all of our panelists. Thank you very much for this conversation today. We would not want to close without expressing appreciation to the Communications, Information, and Technology Ministry of the Church, led by Dr. Teresa Snorton. Dr. Teresa Duhart. Pardon me. But we thank you for your leadership and for making this webinar possible. Thanks to each of you, whether you are pastor or attorney or bishop. Thank you, Dr. Steele, as well. And may God bless us as we take this information and move forward to see perhaps if we could have some more discussions regionally and locally. And this is a start, I believe, for us in great conversations and then action. God bless you each this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.